Look closely at a common vibrant green leaf rustling in the wind. It appears completely peaceful, the very symbol of quiet organic life. Yet beneath that gentle surface lies a relentless, high-stakes trap designed to capture cosmic radiation. In the heart of that leaf, a silver metal is performing a structural miracle, holding a massive web of chemical bonds together so perfectly that it bends light itself. Without this single anchor, the entire green mantle of our planet instantly collapses into gray dust, suffocating everything that breathes. But take that very same metal out of the leaf, forge it into a weapon, and it undergoes a terrifying transformation. Under the right conditions, this silent guardian of life sheds its peaceful mask to become a blinding, howling demon of destruction, a substance so fiercely aggressive that it tears water molecules apart to feed its own furnace, turning the very agent of extinguishing into high-octane fuel. We live our lives surrounded by things that seem stable, predictable, and safe. We trust that water puts out fire, that plants simply grow, and that our own blood flows according to a calm internal logic. But the materials making up our reality possess ancient, violent lineages. The silver-white element hiding inside the machinery of our world is a master of disguise, a profound paradox of weightlessness and fury. When you hold a block of it, your hand expects the heavy, grounded reassurance of iron or steel, but your brain experiences a sudden, jarring shock. It feels like nothing. It feels like an illusion, lighter than aluminum, almost hovering in your palm like an empty box. This eerie lack of weight made it the ultimate prize for secret wartime projects, a critical treasure hunted by every empire desperate to conquer the skies. Yet this weightless ghost is simultaneously a chemical fugitive, constantly looking for an excuse to tear off its civilized metallic armor and return to a state of blinding primordial chaos to understand how deep this deception goes. You only have to look at the striking symmetry of your own existence. If you map out the intricate, multi-armed molecular machine that carries oxygen through your veins, you find a beautiful, geometric masterpiece. Now place it directly next to the molecular engine that captures sunlight inside a plant. The architecture is virtually identical, utilizing the exact same spatial logic, the same sweeping organic arms, the same elegant balance. They are twins in design, but they are utterly divided by a single choice of material. While your blood places a heavy atom of iron at its absolute center to bind life-giving oxygen, the leaf chooses this lightweight paradox. Iron carries the breath of animals. This weightless rival traps the raw energy of a star. If you could somehow reach into the biosphere and pluck this single element out of its central throne, the machinery of nature would freeze instantly. Photosynthesis grinds to a halt, the atmosphere chokes on its own carbon, and the oceans turn toxic. Strip this one metal away and our vibrant, breathing Earth is instantly stripped down to a naked, rusted desert, an orange dead ball indistinguishable from Mars. Yet, this vital pillar of life does not just hide in the delicate veins of plants. If you were to systematically dismantle our entire planet, peeling back the soil, crushing the basalt foundations beneath our streets, and digging deep into the churning, white-hot mantle where continents float, you would find that we are standing on a colossal, pressurized vault of this very substance. It is the fourth most abundant element by mass on Earth, a massive geological foundation hidden directly beneath our feet. For billions of years, raging rivers and relentless rains have carved into these subterranean vaults, dissolving the metal atom by atom, washing it silently into the great planetary sink of the world's oceans. Today, every single cubic meter of ordinary seawater holds over a kilogram of this metal, completely invisible, dissolved without a trace. The global ocean is not just water, it is a massive, liquid mine of raw kinetic potential. And when human ambition finally collided with industrial desperation, engineers realized they no longer needed to blast apart mountains or dig suffocating shafts into the earth. They could simply reach into the waves and pull solid metal straight out of the sea. This sudden realization transformed global geopolitics in the dark opening act of the 20th century. Production lines roared to life overnight, driven by a frantic race to build machines that could outperform gravity itself. When alloyed with lesser elements, this weightless fugitive suddenly gained immense structural strength, enabling warplanes to fly faster, climb higher, and maneuver with a lethal, effortless grace. It was a triumph of material science over the crushing weight of the atmosphere. But as these lightweight silver birds filled the skies, they carried a darker, catastrophic cargo made of the exact same material. Special incendiary mixtures were devised. alloys engineered to ignite with an unquenchable, terrifying brilliance. When these cylinders rained down on packed cities, they created a nightmare that defied all human instinct. Brave men, trained for years to fight fires with water, rushed forward only to realize they were walking into a trap set by fundamental chemistry. The moment water struck the blazing metal, it didn't cool the flames, it was ripped apart at 3,000 degrees. Its hydrogen liberated into an explosive cloud, feeding an inferno that grew brighter, hotter, and more vicious with every drop. Long before it became a tool of total war or the secret engine of global ecosystems, this elusive element was playing tricks on ordinary humans in much humbler settings. Think of a desperate parched farmer centuries ago, discovering a mysterious spring during a brutal summer drought. He watches his livestock refuse to drink the bitter, foul-tasting water, only to notice something completely baffling. A few days later, the animals that simply stood in the muddy runoff emerged with their open wounds miraculously healed, their skin repaired far faster than any medical art could explain. Without a single concept of modern chemistry, humanity had stumbled upon the profound, soothing power of this element's natural salts. It became an overnight sensation, drawing the elite of society to crowd around bitter wells, seeking a cure for every ailment imaginable. But while some sought healing in its liquid form, others were looking directly into the blinding light of the pure metal. Early pioneers of photography found themselves entirely paralyzed the moment the sun dipped below the horizon, their primitive chemical plates blind to the dark. They desperately needed a way to manufacture instant, artificial daylight inside a closed room. The solution was as spectacular as it was hazardous: a fine volatile powder of this exact element. When touched by a spark, it didn't just burn. It vanished in an explosive, chest-thumping white flash so violently bright that it mimicked the sun itself, permanently altering human culture by capturing the very first images of the night. Yet, this brilliant illumination came with a steep price, leaving an entire generation of early visionaries with scorched skin, ruined studios, and singed faces, all from trying to domesticate a metal that fundamentally refuses to be tamed. But the true, terrifying extent of this element's power wasn't restricted to historical laboratories or burning battlefields. To truly comprehend the terrifying power and the vital grace of this element, we have to slip beneath the visible surface of things and descend into the chaotic, microscopic colosseum of the atom. We must look at the structural blueprint that dictates why this 12-numbered character behaves with such manic duality. If you could zoom in on a single atom of this metal, you would see a perfectly balanced nucleus surrounded by a cloud of 12 swirling electrons. 10 of these electrons are locked away in deep, incredibly stable inner shells, tightly bound to the center, refusing to interact with the outside world. But on the absolute periphery, in the outermost orbital zone, live two lonely, highly exposed valence electrons. And it is these two outermost particles that drive the entire dramatic narrative of this element's existence. These two electrons are a source of permanent, intolerable tension. In the language of thermodynamics, every atom on the periodic table harbors a singular, driving obsession: to achieve a state of perfect, serene stability by filling or completely emptying its outer electron shell. For our 12-numbered protagonist, having two stray electrons on its outer rim is a restless curse. It doesn't want them. It desperately, violently wants to shed them so it can fall back on its rock-solid inner core of 10 electrons, achieving the peaceful configuration of a noble gas. This means the metal is essentially a chemical tinderbox, walking through our world with its defensive guard permanently down, not constantly searching for any partner ruthless enough to come and tear those two troublesome electrons away. This intense vulnerability is exactly what makes the element a master of structural architecture inside the living world. Consider again the green leaf, where the metal reigns as the undisputed king of light. When this atom relinquishes its two outer electrons to a surrounding network of nitrogen atoms, it transforms into a doubly charged positive ion. It becomes a compact, highly concentrated knot of electrical force. In the center of the massive, sprawling ring of the chlorophyll molecule, this ion acts like a powerful subatomic magnet. It sits in the dead center of a vast organic arena, pulling on the surrounding chemical bonds with a precise, unyielding grip. Without this central anchor, the giant chlorophyll molecule is nothing but a loose, floppy, dysfunctional string of carbon and hydrogen that would fold in on itself and collapse. The metal ion exerts just the right amount of geometric tension, forcing the entire molecular network to stretch out into a perfectly flat, rigid, symmetrical solar panel. Because the metal holds this grid in such a flawless taut position, it creates a specialized highway for electrons, allowing a massive cloud of alternating chemical bonds to resonate in harmony. When a photon of light screaming from the sun strikes this rigid grid, the energy doesn't get lost or scattered as useless heat. Instead, the perfectly tuned molecular matrix, held open by the iron grip of our 12-numbered ion, absorbs the violent blue and red wavelengths of cosmic radiation, utilizing that raw stellar energy to split water and forge the fuel of life, while bouncing the unused green light back into our eyes. But this very same structural behavior, this frantic desire to discard its outer electrons, takes on a monstrous, predatory persona when the element is ripped away from the gentle custody of biology and subjected to raw heat. If you take a solid piece of this metal and apply a direct flame, you are triggering a terrifying chemical jailbreak. The added thermal energy violently agitates those two outer electrons, pushing them to their breaking point. Suddenly, the thin, protective armor of oxide that coats the metal breaks down, exposing the naked, desperate atoms beneath to the open air. The atmosphere of Earth is rich in oxygen, a fiercely aggressive element that happens to be an insatiable predator for electrons. The moment the burning metal meets oxygen, a devastating energetic transaction occurs. The metal atoms violently hurl their valence electrons into the waiting arms of the oxygen molecules. This is not a gradual reaction. It is an instantaneous, cascading subatomic explosion. As the electrons jump across the abyss, they release an astronomical amount of energy in the form of pure, unadulterated white light and scorching heat. The temperature skyrockets toward 3,000 degrees. The light produced is so intense because the reaction is so complete and efficient. It emits a dense, continuous spectrum of radiation that contains almost every color of the visible rainbow, blasting out a blinding brilliance that can easily scar human retinas. The metal is no longer just burning, it is turned into a miniature, earthbound star, consuming itself with a terrifying, self-destructive hunger that cannot be stopped by ordinary physical means. This brings us right back to the rain-soaked roofs of wartime London and the horrifying trap that awaited the unsuspecting firefighters. When a frantic human pours water onto a raging iron or copper fire, the water absorbs the heat, drops the temperature below the ignition point, and suffocates the flames. Water is the ultimate symbol of safety, but a burning magnesium fire operates on an entirely different level of chemical desperation. At 3,000 degrees, the metal's hunger for oxygen is so ravenous, so completely uncontrollable, that it regards the incoming water not as an enemy, but as an absolute feast. The boiling white-hot metal literally attacks the water molecules. It uses its immense thermal energy to smash into the rigid H2O structure, wrenching the oxygen atom completely away from its hydrogen partners. The metal brutally oxidizes itself using the water's own internal anatomy, turning into a useless white ash of magnesium oxide, while simultaneously liberating the discarded hydrogen gas into the surrounding air. Hydrogen, when heated to these extreme temperatures, immediately mixes with atmospheric oxygen and detonates in a secondary explosive flash. The water doesn't quench the beast. It is systematically disassembled, transformed into a highly explosive rocket fuel that expands the fire into a howling, spitting geyser of molten metal. The very tool used for salvation becomes the engine of an even greater catastrophe, demonstrating a profound chemical treachery that left modern engineers utterly paralyzed. Yet this violent, unyielding nature is precisely what allows this paradoxical substance to bridge the gap between deep geological time, industrial warfare, and the hidden rhythms operating inside your own body. Long before this weightless titan was drafted into the global infernos of the 20th century, it was a ghost haunting the damp, dark basements of European science. For generations, natural philosophers suspected that certain common minerals were hiding a secret, fiercely stubborn resident, a metallic entity that refused to be separated from its geological prison. Every conventional tool of the era failed against it. You could crush the rocks into a fine powder, drench them in the most corrosive acids known to alchemy, or subject them to the absolute limit of a coal-fired blast furnace, and this mysterious element would simply sit there, mocking human effort. Tightly bound to its atomic partners, it required a radical leap in human ambition, a complete rethinking of how to tear nature apart, to finally force this silent captive out into the open, enter a brilliant self-destructive investigator working in the heart of early 19th century London. He was a man who operated with a manic, terrifying urgency running through his days, as if he knew his own life would be cut short by the very elements he sought to conquer. His laboratory was not a place of quiet, orderly contemplation. It was a scene of localized electrical violence. The crown jewel of his workshop was a massive custom-built Galvani battery, a monstrous, multi-celled engine capable of channeling a raw, continuous torrent of electricity. This scientist realized that heat and fire were too clumsy to unlock the deepest secrets of matter. He needed a microscopic crowbar, an invisible force that could reach directly into the architecture of a molecule and pull it apart at the seams. He chose the electric current. The method was as dangerous as it was revolutionary. By passing this violent electrical current through melted, bubbling compounds, he began a relentless, one-man assault on the periodic table. One by one, stubborn minerals that had resisted human intervention for thousands of years began to crack. First came a soft silver metal that burst into spontaneous flames the moment it touched the damp air, followed immediately by another hyper-reactive sibling. The investigator was intoxicated by the speed of his own discoveries, literally watching the fundamental building blocks of reality separate before his eyes on the ends of his charged metal wires. But when he turned his monstrous battery towards the stubborn white oxide of our 12-numbered protagonist, the universe put up a vicious fight. The compound refused to melt at normal temperatures, and when it did, it instantly choked the apparatus, spitting toxic fumes and short-circuiting the electrodes. It was a brutal stalemate. Refusing to accept defeat, the scientist resorted to a desperate toxic compromise. He introduced liquid mercury into the molten mix, using it as a chemical bait to coax the hidden element out. The trick worked, but only partially. Instead of a pure, gleaming bar of the weightless metal, he obtained a heavy, sluggish, poisonous alloy, a silver sludge. He had officially proved the element existed, and he claimed the right to give it its permanent name. But he lived out the rest of his short, volatile life without ever seeing this lightweight phantom in its pure, unadulterated state. It would take another 2 decades, and the meticulous, quiet persistence of a French investigator across the Channel to finally break the deadlock. Abandoning the brutal force of electricity, this second scientist devised a masterful, high-stakes chemical swap. He isolated a highly volatile chloride form of the element and sealed it inside a heavy, reinforced iron crucible alongside chunks of pure, metallic potassium, an element so intensely reactive that it treats almost any contact as an excuse for an explosion. The experiment was a terrifying gamble. Heating these two unstable substances together inside a sealed metal container was essentially building a controlled pipe bomb in the name of science. As the heat rose, a silent, furious battle took place inside the iron walls. The ravenous potassium atoms ripped through the compound, violently stealing the chlorine partners and leaving our 12-numbered element with nothing to hold on to. When the crucible finally cooled and was carefully cut open, the investigator reached into the debris and pulled out a collection of tiny, gleaming, silver-white spheres. For the very first time in human history, the weightless paradox was sitting in a human palm in its pure form. It was a breathtaking revelation, a metal that looked as structural as iron, yet felt as light as a handful of dried leaves. But the true human drama of this element was only beginning. Because once humanity knew how to manufacture this weightless ghost, the industrial empires of the world realized they could use it to completely redefine the boundaries of global power. By the time the world plunged into the total mobilization of the 1940s, this once obscure laboratory curiosity was suddenly elevated to a resource of absolute strategic survival. In the race for aerial supremacy, every single gram of dead weight stripped from a bomber's fuselage meant more ammunition, greater fuel capacity, and the difference between returning home or plunging into the ocean, a massive, frantic industrial crusade began. In a remote coastal stretch of the American South, engineers built a sprawling, unprecedented mega factory designed to perform a feat that sounded like pure alchemy, pumping millions of gallons of raw ocean water through giant networks of lime vats and electrical cells, transforming the invisible dissolved wealth of the sea into endless tons of solid structural armor for the sky. The scale was staggering. Night and day, the ocean was drained to feed the foundries, turning out lightweight components for thousands of fighter planes. But this brilliant engineering triumph was inextricably tied to an apocalyptic reality. The very same weightless property that allowed these silver birds to conquer the sky made them the perfect, devastating payload to drop onto the crowded civilian centers below. The element had successfully escaped the quiet confines of the 19th century laboratory, only to become the inescapable, blinding nightmare of a world at war. Today, the smoke of the 20th century has cleared, but the weightless phantom has not retreated back into the shadows. Instead, it has silently infiltrated the very fabric of your modern, hyper-connected existence, embedding itself so deeply into your daily routine that you look directly at it hundreds of times a day without ever realizing it is there. If you hold a modern smartphone, a sleek laptop, or a professional camera, you are participating in the direct lineage of those wartime aviation projects. The uncanny lightness of these devices, the way they defy your brain's expectation of how a metal object should weigh, is the modern incarnation of the exact same engineering trick. By blending this hyper-reactive element into the structural chassis of your electronics, humanity has created a generation of technology that is incredibly durable, yet light enough to be carried effortlessly in a pocket. But its modern deployment stretches far beyond the sleek aluminum-magnesium alloys of consumer gadgets. As we stand on the precipice of a global green energy transition, this element is once again being drafted into a frantic race against time, this time to conquer the crushing weight of the electric vehicle revolution. The modern electric car is plagued by a hidden systemic crisis, the immense dead weight of its own lithium-ion battery packs, which can add half a ton of lumbering mass to a single vehicle. To offset this burden, automotive engineers are turning to this 12-numbered savior, stamping out entire vehicle frames from its weightless alloys to bleed off every possible kilogram of excess mass, stretching the range of the vehicle without touching the battery. And in the absolute vanguard of advanced energy laboratories, scientists are attempting the ultimate subatomic heist, replacing lithium entirely with this element to create a radical new generation of batteries. Because each ion of this metal carries a double positive charge instead of a single one, it possesses the theoretical power to carry twice the electrical energy in the exact same footprint. If we can successfully tame its slow, sluggish movement through modern electrolytes, it could break the energy grid wide open. Yet, true to its capricious nature, the element resists. It clings to its chemical neighbors, clogging up the internal pathways of the battery, refusing to yield its double charge without a bitter, prolonged scientific struggle. While engineers fight to harness its energy in laboratories, the element is quietly performing an even more miraculous, silent service inside your own biology. At this very second, within the microscopic confines of your cells, a silent army of these atoms is working to prevent your nervous system from spinning into total, uncoordinated madness. This element acts as the ultimate biological gatekeeper, standing guard at the entry points of your neurons. It physically blocks the chaotic, random influx of stimulating ions, ensuring that your brain cells only fire when there is a real, meaningful reason to do so. When your modern diet, stripped of natural minerals by aggressive industrial farming and filtered water, starves your body of this crucial element, the guardrails fall. The neurons become hyperexcitable, firing wildly into the void. You experience this molecular mutiny as sudden, unprovoked anxiety, a racing mind that refuses to sleep, or a sudden, excruciating midnight spasm where your muscle fibers lock up in a tight, unyielding knot. Your body is screaming for the 12-numbered element, desperate for the subatomic stabilizer that keeps the electrical storms of your body under control. And in the most dramatic arenas of modern medicine, inside pulsating emergency rooms and sterile intensive care bays, doctors utilize a concentrated, liquid surge of this very element to instantly override catastrophic heart arrhythmias or halt the fatal full-body seizures of pregnant mothers, bringing patients back from the absolute brink of death with a single rapid intravenous push. It is here, in this profound intersection of cosmic history, industrial violence, and intimate human survival, that we find a deep, humbling truth. Every single atom of this lightweight, paradoxical metal currently stabilizing the rhythm of your heart. Every atom holding open the flat green solar panels of the trees outside your window, and every atom that burned with a demonic fury over the skies of London, shares the exact same cosmic birth certificate. They were not forged on Earth. They were cooked deep inside the searing, thermonuclear furnaces of ancient, massive stars that lived and died billions of years before our solar system even existed, when those colossal stars ran out of fuel. They collapsed under their own immense gravity and exploded as spectacular galaxy-spanning supernovae. That violent stellar cataclysm was the only force in the universe powerful enough to forge this element and blast it out into the dark, frozen void of space. We are quite literally walking, breathing, and building our electronic empires using the scattered, weightless ash of dead stars. It is an exquisite, terrifying continuum. A stellar explosion billions of years ago created the material that allows a leaf to capture sunlight, which created the oxygen that allowed human consciousness to evolve. Consciousness that now uses the exact same material to build weapons of total destruction and tools of infinite connection. Humanity prides itself on its hubris, believing that we are the masters of the material world, that we have successfully domesticated the periodic table to serve our whims. But if this element teaches us anything, it is that we are merely borrowing its properties for a fleeting, fragile moment in geological time. The metal doesn't care about our empires, our technologies, or our survival. It operates under a much older, immutable code of atomic physics. It is a permanent, restless fugitive, forever waiting for the context to change, forever waiting to shed its structural armor, to tear apart the closest water molecule, and to return in a blinding, beautiful flash of white light to the primordial chaos from which it came. We do not command this element. We merely walk along the razor-thin edge of its paradox, surviving entirely at the mercy of its 12 swirling electrons.